Thanksgiving has always been a performance in my family. My name is Emily Harper. I'm 31, a software developer living in Portland, Oregon, and every year I drive 9 hours south to visit my family in Redding for the holidays. It's not because I expect warmth or welcome, but because some part of me still believes I should show up. Maybe it's an obligation, maybe it's hope, maybe it's just habit. But this year, something was different. I felt it the moment I stepped onto the porch of the house I grew up in. It was colder, not just in the air, but in the way my mother, Diane, answered the door. She opened it halfway, holding a wine glass in one hand, and blinked like I'd caught her off guard. "Oh," she said. "You came." I held up the pumpkin tart I'd baked from scratch, gluten-free, because my cousin Lindsay had celiac. "I thought it might go nice with coffee later." She barely glanced at it. "We already have dessert." Then she turned and walked back into the house. I stood there for a moment, fingers tightening around the pie tin, then followed her in. The living room buzzed with the low hum of conversation. My younger brother, Noah, was already surrounded by laughter near the fireplace, one hand wrapped around a wine glass, the other slung casually around his girlfriend Courtney's shoulder. Noah, the golden boy, the favorite, the one who always made everything look effortless, even when it wasn't. I hovered near the archway, unsure where to go. No one greeted me, no one even looked up. When dinner was called, I followed the crowd into the dining room, and that's when I saw it. The table was set for 11, names printed in cursive on cream-colored place cards: Noah, Courtney, Mom, Dad, Aunt Marla, Uncle Jerry, Lindsay, Lindsay's husband Dan, the twins, all neatly arranged. Except there wasn't one for me. I stared for a moment, thinking it was just a mistake. Maybe mine had fallen under a plate or slipped behind the candles. But no. I scanned again. Nothing. There was a folding chair against the wall, one of those cold metal ones we only brought out when extra guests showed up. I took it without a word, dragging it to the end of the table. The screech it made against the hardwood made people glance briefly, but no one offered a seat or even scooted over. I sat, and I stayed quiet. Dinner passed in a blur of fork clinks and exaggerated stories. Noah had just been promoted, some sales team lead thing. My uncle clapped him on the back like he'd cured cancer. I chewed slowly, the food tasting fine, but feeling like gravel in my mouth. Now and then, I looked at my mother, hoping to catch her eye, maybe to get a nod or some unspoken acknowledgement. She never looked my way. And then, just before dessert, she stood up. And the table quietly blanketed. "I just want to take a moment to express how proud I am. There's nothing who has truly stepped up and gone above and beyond." I stumbled. She turned slightly, arm outstretched. "To Noah!" He clapped. Aunt Marla even whistled. And I, well, I didn't know. I looked stunned, small. I stood, my knees brushing the underside of the table. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "Thanks," I said, for finally saying it out loud. The clapping stopped, and I turned toward the door. I didn't plan on making a scene. I just wanted to leave with a shred of dignity before the burn in my chest turned to tears. But I'd barely taken 2 steps when I heard a voice I hadn't expected to cut through the silence. "Wait!" It was my father, James, usually the quiet one, the peacemaker, the man who sipped his wine and stayed out of conflict if it were a religion. He looked at me now, eyes steady. "Tell them what you did." I froze. I hadn't told him everything. I didn't think he even noticed. For most of my life, I wasn't sure he noticed much at all when it came to me. But his voice wasn't asking, it was permitting me. So I turned back toward the table, and I told them. "You want to toast to Noah?" I said, my voice steady. "Maybe toast to me first, because I'm the reason he even got that job." Every head turned. Noah blinked. "What?" "The hiring freeze at Axis Marketing, Yeah, they weren't even accepting applications. He sent me his resume, full of typos, by the way, and I cleaned it up, rewrote half of it, sent it to someone I mentored years ago who now works in HR. I got him the interview. My mother's lips tightened. That's not true, she snapped. Noah was fully qualified. He didn't even know what B2B meant when he called me for help. I cut in. He majored in theater. His cover letter said he was good with people. That's all he had. I made the call. Silence. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was just tired. Tired of dragging a chair to a table I helped keep from collapsing. I didn't want credit, I said. I just didn't want to disappear. And for the first time, no one clapped. They just stared. The silence was deep, hollow, like the air had thinned. Noah sat still, his fork motionless in his hand. His girlfriend, Courtney, leaned back slightly, eyes darting between him and me. Aunt Marla cleared her throat like she was trying to find something polite to ask. AI, but came up empty. Then Noah laughed, short, dry. Come on, Em, he said. You're exaggerating. I sent out like 20 applications. You're not the only reason I got that job. I met his eyes. Noah, you begged me to help you. You called me in a panic because you didn't know how to write a professional email. You didn't even have a LinkedIn. He blinked. That was a long time ago. 10 months. I turned to the rest of the table. My voice was quieter now, but it didn't waver. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to embarrass him. I wanted him to feel like he earned it. But watching all of you clap like he got there alone, like I was just a background actor in this family's show, I couldn't keep swallowing it anymore. My mom crossed her arms. So what do you want, Emily? A thank you card? A parade? No, I said. I do not want to be invisible. Just once. And then the words I'd held for years rose like a tide. When I graduated early from Cal Poly with honors, you didn't come to the ceremony. You said, maybe it's not worth the trip. When I won the state tech scholarship, you called it a cute computer thing. Meanwhile, Noah gets a framed certificate for finishing an online branding course, and it's treated like he won the Nobel Prize. Mom scoffed, her voice clipped. It's not the same. You've always been so dramatic. No, I said. I've always been quiet, and you mistook that for unimportant. I paused, letting that land. Then I added, when Dad hurt his back last winter and couldn't work, I sent groceries every week for 2 months. You said, that was sweet of you, like I was some stranger helping out of pity. Dad shifted in his chair now, visibly uncomfortable. His gaze flicked from his plate to me, then back again. And that IRS letter about the lien on the house? The one that disappeared out of nowhere? That wasn't God. That was me. I paid it off. Quietly. With my savings. Gasps rippled down the table. Not dramatic gasps. Just the sound of people being forced to confront a truth they hadn't dared to consider. Dad's voice came then, low and hoarse. You paid the lien? I nodded. With everything I had, because I couldn't watch you lose the house you built. My mom leaned back, her expression unreadable. Then, with icy calculation, she asked, if you had that kind of money, why didn't you help when Noah's car broke down last month? The words hit harder than I expected. And that was when it clicked. It's not that you don't understand, I said slowly. It's that you don't care to. Noah's car was more urgent than your husband's house. Then your daughter's bank account is being emptied. You weren't just blind, you chose to be. Noah's expression began to crack. His eyes met mine across the table, and for the first time, they weren't smug or amused. They were ashamed. I didn't know, he murmured. About the lien, about any of that. You didn't want to know, I said, because it was easier to believe the version of the story where you were the hero and I was just supporting cast. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my father stood. That alone was enough to startle everyone. Dad never stood at the table unless he was making a toast or reaching for the mashed potatoes. But now he stood tall, taller than I remembered him looking in years. "I didn't know she helped you get that job, Noah," he said, voice firm. "And I didn't know about the house, or the groceries, or any of it." He turned to me. "You shouldn't have had to do it alone." My mother's eyes narrowed. "She's just trying to make herself look good. You don't know the full story." Dad looked at her. "No, I didn't. But I know enough now." Then he said the one thing I never thought I'd hear from him, not in a million family dinners. "I'm sorry, Emily." The room fell so still, I could hear the clock ticking behind me. Aunt Marla muttered something to her husband. Uncle Jerry stared at his drink. My cousin Lindsay looked down at her hands. Noah sat, silent, visibly shrinking under the weight of what had been said. My mother, for once, had nothing to say. I breathed in, slowly, and for the first time in years, the air didn't burn. The front door creaked open, letting in a draft of November air. I needed space. I needed cold air that didn't feel like judgment. So I stepped out onto the porch, the pumpkin tart still untouched in the kitchen behind me. I didn't care. I didn't need dessert. I needed distance. I was halfway down the steps when I heard it. "Emily, wait!" It was Noah. His voice was softer now, not performative, not full of bravado. It was the voice of someone who wasn't sure if he had the right to speak. I turned. He stood at the top of the porch, hands shoved into his coat pockets, staring at the floorboards like they might give him answers. "I need to admit something," he said. I didn't move. He exhaled, watching his breath fog in the night air. "I knew," he said finally, "about the job." I blinked. "What?" "Not at first, not when I applied. But after I got the offer, I overheard a call. HR mentioned your name, said something about how your referral made it a no-brainer. I knew then. I didn't say anything. I stared at him, heat rising in my chest again. But this time, it wasn't just anger, it was disbelief. You let Mom make speeches about how proud she was of you. You let her frame that certificate and say you climbed the ladder all by yourself. And you knew I was the one who built the first few rungs? He nodded. I told myself I still had to go to the interview. I still had to show up. So I earned it. And when the praise came, it felt good. And I didn't want to ruin that. "You didn't just stay silent," I said, my voice low. "You let her erase me, and you let it happen because it made you feel big." His face crumpled slightly. There was shame in it now, real shame, not the kind that disappears when the spotlight turns back on. "I'm not proud of it," he whispered, "but that's not all." I narrowed my eyes. "What do you mean?" He looked behind him, then stepped down to my level on the walkway. His voice dropped. "It's about the house. There's something else you need to know." My gut clenched. "She's selling it," he said. "Mom, she's been talking to a realtor, quietly. She wants it off her hands before the end of the year." I took a step back. "What?" "She's already picked out a condo near Aunt Lorna in Sacramento. Says she wants to downsize and have a fresh start. But she hasn't told Dad. Not a word. She says the deed is still in her name alone, so she doesn't need his signature to list it." My head spun. "She was going to sell it?" I whispered. "The house I emptied my savings for? The one I saved so Dad wouldn't lose the roof over his head?" He nodded. "She told me not to tell anyone. Said it would complicate things. Said you'd get dramatic, and Dad would just make it harder." I sat on the bottom step, the chill from the concrete cutting through my jeans like a blade. She was going to blindside him. "I didn't realize how serious it was until you spoke up tonight," Noah said. "I thought she was just talking. I didn't think she'd do it. But now? I think she will." I looked up at him. "And you were going to stay quiet. Again." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I was." There was nothing left to say. My hands curled into fists on my lap, but not from rage, just raw exhaustion. My chest felt hollow, scraped out by years of silence, and I thought I had learned to live with it. The front door opened behind us. Dad stepped out, jacket over one arm, confusion furrowed deep into his forehead. "You two all right?" he asked. Neither of us answered. "I think we should go back inside," he said. "There's something I need to say." Noah glanced at me, unsure. I hesitated, torn between wanting to leave and something deeper. Maybe it was the same small hope that had made me come in the first place. I nodded. Together, we followed Dad back into the house. The laughter was gone now. The room was quiet, uncomfortable. People shifted in their seats, but no one dared speak. Something had changed, and everyone felt it. Dad walked to the head of the table. It was Mom's spot, always had been. She wasn't there now. She hadn't returned from her dramatic exit, and maybe she wouldn't. Dad didn't sit. "I've made a lot of mistakes as a father," he began. "I thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. I thought love looked like letting people sort things out themselves." He looked around the table. "But tonight I learned something. I've spent years watching my daughter carry weight that wasn't hers, watching her keep this family from falling apart, while the rest of us clapped for someone else." The silence sharpened. "She paid the lien on this house. She helped me walk again when I couldn't stand. She cooked when I couldn't move. She sent groceries, paid bills, and never once asked for credit." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. "I spoke to the lawyer last week. Starting next month, the house will be in both our names, mine and Emily's." Gasps. Audible ones this time. "You're giving her the house?" someone muttered. "I'm giving her what she already saved," Dad said calmly. "During the refinance, Diane signed over financial authority. She didn't read the fine print. She doesn't have the power to stop this." Mom walked in. Her lipstick was slightly smudged. Her hair was pulled back like she had faced in the backyard, and her expression was darkness. "You can't be serious," said Dad. "I He looked at her. "I'm doing this because we were going to celebrate." That stopped her. Her eyes flicked to Noah. He looked away. "I didn't have to," Dad replied. "I already knew." Her face lost color. She sat down slowly, and for the first time in my life, she had nothing ready to say. The room had the brittle quiet of something broken, not shattered loudly, but cracked deep. Mom sat stiff in her chair, arms crossed like she was defending a throne. But Dad was still standing, holding that manila envelope like it was a sword. And for once, everyone else at the table wasn't looking to her for direction. They were looking at him. Or at me. Uncle Jerry opened his mouth like he wanted to smooth things over. "Maybe we should all just—" "No," Dad cut in. His voice wasn't loud, but it was final. "This isn't something we patch up with pie and polite conversation." The clock ticked louder than it should have. Maybe because for years, it had filled the silence where real conversations should have been. Dad turned to the rest of the family. "You all sat here tonight and applauded, while my daughter was humiliated at her own family's table. And I didn't say anything. That's on me." His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't stop. "When I was recovering from surgery last year, it was Emily who made sure the mortgage got paid. She made the phone calls I couldn't make. She did the shopping. She handled the bills. And she never once asked for applause." My mother rolled her eyes and leaned back. "Oh, please. Are we rewriting history now?" "No," Dad said, looking directly at her. "We're finally telling it right." She opened her mouth again, but he raised a hand. Not with anger, but with something heavier. Disappointment. "You tried to sell this house, the house she saved, without telling me. You wanted to disappear before I ever had the chance to stop you." She glared at Noah. "You betrayed me." Noah didn't look up. His shoulders had folded in like the weight of it all was finally pressing down. I kept your secret long enough, he muttered, and it almost broke her. Mom stood, fists at her sides. So what? You win now, Emily? You get the house? You get to be the victim and the hero all at once? I stared at her. Calm. This was never about winning, I said quietly. I never wanted a trophy. I just wanted the truth. I wanted not to be erased. Her face twitched, like something inside cracked. But she didn't cry. She never did. Instead, she turned and walked out again. No one followed her this time. Dad set the envelope down on the table and looked around at the rest of the family. I don't expect anyone to undo what's already been done. But this is the start of setting it right. Aunt Marla shifted in her seat. We didn't know, she offered weakly. You didn't want to know, I said. That's what made it easy to pretend. There were no arguments. Noah looked at me from across the table, not with apology, but with something closer to understanding. It was the first time I'd ever seen him see me. Not as a sibling he had to compete with. Not as someone to lean on or ignore. Just me. After a few minutes of that thick, unmoving silence, people started to gather their things. Not in a flurry of hugs and goodbyes, but slowly, like they were leaving a funeral. Lindsay glanced at me before slipping on her coat. Dan nodded once. The twins didn't say anything. Even Courtney, still clinging to Noah's side earlier, left with a glance that said she didn't know where to stand anymore. And then it was just the three of us. Me, Dad, Noah. The pie I brought still sat untouched on the counter. The candles had burned halfway down. The dining room was dimmer now, but it felt more honest than it had all night. Dad poured himself a glass of wine from the half-empty bottle. Then he poured another and handed it to me. No toasts, he said. Just, thank you. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Noah appeared a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of coffee, one for me, one for him. No filters, no speech. He placed it in front of me. I don't know if I can fix everything, he said. I've spent a lot of years enjoying the spotlight you lit without realizing it. I looked at him over the rim of the mug. At least now you know where the cord was plugged in. He let out a breath. Not quite a laugh, but close. I want to do better, he said. Not just because I feel guilty. Okay, partly that, but mostly because I miss having a real sister, not just the idea of one. That made something in my chest pull. I took a sip of coffee. It was still too hot, but I didn't flinch. We'll see, I said. He nodded. Fair. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we weren't on opposite ends of the table anymore either. Dad turned to me again. His eyes looked heavier, but more awake than I'd seen in years. You shouldn't have had to speak just to be seen, he said. But I'm glad you finally did. I almost didn't come this year, I admitted. He nodded. I almost didn't say anything, but I'm here now. The sentence lingered between us, and for once, that was enough. By the time I stepped outside again, the air had dropped 10 degrees. The wind whispered across the porch, like it had something to say, but for once, I didn't feel like I needed to brace myself. I stood there for a moment, looking at the porch light casting a pale yellow over the weathered wood. The same porch I'd walked up 100 times, feeling like an outsider. Now, it still looked the same, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't carrying their silence anymore. Noah came out behind me, holding his coat in one hand. He didn't say anything at first, just stood next to me in the dark. Close, but not too close. You think she'll sell the house? I asked. He sighed. Not anymore. Dad's name is on it now. She'd have to go through both of you. I nodded. She'll hate that. She already does, he said, half a smile in his voice. But she also knows she can't steamroll everyone anymore. There was a long pause. Then he added, You think she'll come back? I shrugged. She always does. But next time, it'll be different. This time, she won't be the one writing the story. We stayed outside until the cold crept under our sleeves. And still, I didn't feel like leaving. Not in the way I usually did, running out the door with my heart in pieces and my tongue bitten bloody. Eventually, Noah left with a quiet night. I stayed a few minutes longer, watching my breath rise and disappear. When I walked back in, Dad was folding up extra chairs. The formal centerpiece had been pushed to the side. The wine glasses were empty. There was no trace of the toast that had lit the match hours earlier. "You staying the night?" he asked. I hesitated. "Is that okay?" He looked at me, almost confused. "Emily, this is your house, too, now." The words hit deeper than I expected. I nodded. "Then yeah, I'll stay." We didn't say goodnight like people in movies. He just gave me a soft look and went upstairs. I grabbed a blanket from the linen closet and curled up on the living room couch. The same one I'd helped pick out when I was 17, back when I still thought family pride was something you could earn by doing enough, being enough, shrinking yourself enough. The next morning, I woke to quiet. The good kind. Sunlight spilled through the blinds in soft lines across the floor. I padded into the kitchen, still wrapped in the blanket, and made coffee like I'd done in my apartment hundreds of times. But it tasted different here. There was a knock on the back door. I opened it to find Noah standing there, holding a small box. "Thought I'd drop this off before Courtney and I head out." He handed it to me. Inside was a photo. One of us as kids, me with a missing tooth, him in a Batman cape. We were building a pillow fort in this very living room. "I found it in Mom's office last week," he said. "Guess she forgot she had it." I stared at it, my throat tightening. "You used to read to me in that fort," he added, "even when I couldn't sit still." "I remember." He paused, then said something that felt heavier than it sounded. "I'm not going to forget again." I nodded. "See that you don't." We didn't say goodbye. Not really. But we understood. When they left, the house was quiet again. Not cold, not sharp, just still. Later that morning, I sat by the window with my coffee and watched a squirrel dart across the yard. The wind had kicked up again, shaking loose the last of the orange leaves. It looked like any other Thanksgiving weekend. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own family. I didn't feel like someone passing through. I felt like I had made something stay. Not through anger or guilt, but by finally choosing myself, by speaking, by naming what no one else dared to. And that kind of truth doesn't vanish, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Sometimes families aren't broken by silence. Sometimes they are built again because someone finally refuses them. There's a kind of freedom that comes not from being celebrated, but from no longer shrinking. For years, Emily Harper lived quietly inside her family's shadow. Her accomplishments were papered over, her generosity mistaken for obligation, and her silence interpreted as insignificance. But in a single night, the quiet girl who always made room at the table finally asked for her chair and claimed it. This story isn't about revenge or winning. It's about truth. It's about what happens when someone who's always been taken for granted dares to say, "I deserve to be seen." Emily didn't yell. She didn't demand apologies or applause. She simply revealed what had been there all along, the quiet scaffolding she built while everyone else stood tall above it. Her father's acknowledgement came late, but it came with weight. Her brother's regret wasn't instant redemption, but it was a start. And even her mother's silence, once a weapon, no longer had the power to unmake her. For anyone who's ever felt invisible in their own family, this story is a reminder. Your worth isn't measured by who claps the loudest. It's measured by what you carry and what you choose to put down. Sometimes healing starts not with a hug or a toast, but with a deep breath and a voice that says, finally, enough. And sometimes, that's all it takes to begin again.